this episode of the Business Communicators.
We've become more and more antisocial as a society. We've lost the art of communication, the art of communicating with each other's, the art of personal connection.
You're listening to the Business Communicators. And now your hosts, Austin Staton and Thomas Bain.
Welcome into another episode of the Business Communicators. My name's Austin Staton, joined here alongside Thomas Bain on the #1 business communications podcast in the world, and that's a verifiable fact. Thomas, it's Father's Day weekend. I guess by the time you're listening to this episode, it's already been Father's Day. It's U.S. Open final. You've got the Formula One race in Canada this week. You've got the College World Series starting up. Happy Father's Day to you.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to say Happy Father's Day to all dads, whether it's yours or you just act as a father figure to them. So many of the things that we get from our lives come from our parents, our fathers, especially being a girl dad makes life a little more entertaining for me, especially in about 10, 12 years from now.
God bless.
But hoping to, just teaching those life lessons of work ethic, treating people kind, those kind of things. And it's a good time to give a hug, especially to your fathers, but even if it's a good friend who acts like a father figure to you. So I celebrate and honor them as well.
And of course, you probably got to throw in some dad jokes where you can.
I will attempt. And I saw a great meme the other day about every time a kid gives a dad joke, a dad gets its wings. But they've actually shown that dad jokes help the upbringing of kids about not taking yourself too seriously and being able to laugh at the small things of life. Some random psychology report that I think I read, 18 months ago or something like that I never thought I was ever going to have to go back into the back of my mind and figure out to get the actual source of that.
That's interesting to know. Good to know. I do want to give a quick shout out real quick because one of my old bosses, I can't remember if we've had him on this podcast or not, but I think we've definitely talked about it. But one of my old bosses at Baylor when I used to work in athletics, his name is Chris Yandel. He's actually heavily involved with PRSA in Louisiana. He wrote a book called Lucky Enough. I think we've talked about it on this podcast before, but he went through kind of, some challenging time where his family was moving back and forth. And I think his daughter was like starting middle school at the time. And they had just moved from out of state and, to kind of, I guess, help encourage her, build confidence. He started writing lunch notes on sticky notes to his daughter like every day and started sharing them on social media. Ended up becoming like quite popular. And so he wrote a book, Lucky Enough. And, he's appeared on like, I think the Today Show, the Kelly Clarkson Show. And he still posts these, like 4 or 5 years later. So it's pretty cool to see. So we'll drop a link in the show notes if you want to check it out. It's a good book. Kind of, it's like it's a guide, I guess, for parents to, maybe do similar notes of their own, to encourage your children.
And it's funny as we advance in our careers and have teams that either we work with or are supposed to be in charge of. I've always said, motivation, positive reinforcement, and just, hey, you're doing a good job. And we've talked about this on the podcast is don't be afraid to fail. And a good leader will let you fail. And as long as you're learning from it, don't make the same mistake 2, 3, 17 times.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and get into the headlines. Of course, if you want to follow us, just search @BizCommunicator on all the platforms. You can also visit thebusinesscommunicators.com. But, it's been a few weeks since we've recorded. I've been traveling the last 3-4 weeks, it seems. It's been quite hectic and chaotic on my end. But WWDC, which is the Apple annual conference where they always release their new tech. Tim Cook was famous for, or Steve Jobs is famous for, and there's one more thing. And the one more thing this year was kind of interesting, Thomas. It was the Apple Vision Pro, which could be yours for the small price of $3,600 or 12 monthly payments of $300. It was interesting. It was interesting to watch that, session. It was probably about 30 minutes discussing the technology. And I will say, as a tech nerd, an Apple nerd myself, the technology was fascinating. The concepts of it were fascinating. I understand the price point apparently for the amount of, I guess, technology and parts that they're putting into it. It's something like $1,600 or something like that. Um, but there are some, question marks that I have, because we've kind of talked about AI, augmented reality. We've talked about the metaverse on this podcast. And interestingly enough, Meta, who changed their name to really embrace the metaverse, is almost kind of like dialed back on some of their communications for the metaverse. And so this is kind of, Apple almost saying to Meta, like, all right, we're skipping from the metaverse and we're going straight into augmented reality. And I think this is more of a proof of concept. The devices will start rolling out, and I believe early 2024 is what they're calling it. So that could be Q1, it could be April, it could be May, and it's only going to be in the United States. So investors, I don't think we're too happy with that news. The share price fell a little bit as a result. Just kind of curious on your thoughts. Obviously, neither one of us have the device yet. We didn't go to the media day. We didn't get to test it or anything like that. But it seemed that Apple was trying to make this almost not just a consumer product, but a product for businesses as well to help maybe enhance that communication process.
One, I'm taken back by the price tag, $3,400. It's not change you find in the couch. But again, when Apple came out with the iPhone and revolutionized the computers in your pockets, everybody was like, "Who's going to pay $1,000+ for a cell phone?"
Yeah, and now we do that every 2 years.
Especially one that's as big as it is, and now it's like, how do you not have a phone that size? So when Apple does those kind of things, I kind of trust them a little bit. They've done the market research. They've always done the market research. They know their niche. They know what they're doing. The whole virtual reality versus augmented reality. I'm a big fan of the augmented reality. I see a whole lot of communications aspects of it, training aspects of it, B2B aspects of it, even B2C aspects of it. Hey, borrow this set of glasses. You're redecorating your house. Okay, how does it look with this couch in that spot? Or the HVAC person who's going to repair your air conditioning. You don't need to spend as much training with them because they can put on the glasses, see what they're working on, and they know exactly what part is going where. And that's across all industries. And augmented reality has been with us for quite a while as we talk about the military and pilots, and with the heads-up displays and those kind of things that kind of pop into play. The virtual reality side of it, I'm still kind of on the fence about. There was an interesting article, I think it was Axios that wrote it, talking about whether a certain industry is going to grasp hold of the virtual reality realm, which is the industry that Apple does not want to be associated with, which is porn. But porn is what has basically decided any sort of new technology. If we go back to like VHS versus beta.
And then DVDs versus what was the other one that was competing?
Blu-ray.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested to watch that aspect of it. I want to see how Apple morphs this into a true business play. And if they're spending $1,600 in parts and pieces and glass and electronics and the list goes on, they're still making a pretty hefty margin if they're getting $3,400 for them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think this is also a test case for Apple to see proof of concept. What is their market? Who's buying it? What is the feedback going to be? And then, of course, they'll develop follow-ups of that. Like, most times I wouldn't recommend getting the first iteration of something. Always wait. Mark Gurman from Bloomberg, who covers technology and Apple, wrote in his newsletter last week that Apple is also working on a cheaper version, which will probably come out in about 2025, I believe. How much cheaper? I don't know. But when you look at those like headsets, Meta with their Oculus, you can get one. I think the Quest 3 is like $500 or something like that, and that's a lot for people that want to do gaming. It's got the controllers and everything like that. That's where the audience sits, and it's much more affordable, to get something at that price point than it is to pay $3,500. Some other things to kind of consider with the Apple Vision Pro. One thing that I think is amazing is it has no controllers, right? And that's something that the Oculus does have. So it's got so many sensors in there where it tracks all of your movements, your eyes, it tracks your hands. Um, the downfall is the battery life is only 2 hours, right? And so throughout their presentation, they were advertising you can watch live sports, you can watch full-length movies. And it's like, well, you can't, not unless you want to be strapped to a power cord that's in your you know, wall socket for that period of time. So the use case for it, I don't really know about. And then here's the other concern that I have is I think as the internet has evolved, as cell phones have evolved, how technology has evolved, we've become more and more antisocial as a society. We've lost the art of communication, the art of communicating with each other's, the art of personal connection. And my concern with products like the Apple Vision Pro and the metaverse is that further removes us from humanity. And that's a major concern that I have.
I have the same concern. And as we record this virtually, we make a point to get together every so often when we can, whether it's for barbecue or just lunch or just let's catch up and say hi to each other if we're within 5 minutes of each other, a cup of coffee and those kind of things.
Even something as simple as picking up the phone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a phone call versus a text message, I get the generational thing, but it's a real-time conversation kind of thing that takes place. I'm with you because you have sports arenas, you have video games. Nothing beats when we were growing up playing Street Fighter, sitting next to each other and pulling the cord out of it, being like, "Hey, look, you can't fight." That scene in Swingers comes to mind. I pause the game. Movie. I pause the game. Don't. Hey, watch this. It's the same concept. Virtual versus in person. I think virtual is more transactional than the in person. Hey, let's really truly get to know each other. I am intrigued at the concert experience. We've talked on this about Travis Scott doing a concert and other things, virtual concerts, whether they're free or whether they're $5 to attend or $10 or whatever it boils down to be. But it still doesn't replace going to see Taylor Swift at NRG.
Yeah,
throw back to an old episode there.
You can see it, but you can't feel it. And yes. I think that's one thing about in person is that the your five senses experiencing something, and I don't know that you're going to be able to replicate that. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how the sales are in 2024 when it comes out, what the immediate feedback is, how the software is upgraded, what applications are actually available, when it starts. I don't know. Because I can't see businesses spending $3,500 to purchase this for, their employees. Especially, it's most businesses aren't even going to buy Apple products right now for employees because they're so expensive compared to PCs. It's much cheaper for businesses to buy Microsoft, HP, Dell than it is to do Apple. So I don't know how this is going to have large scale deployment in the corporate world, at least right now.
I'm on the same page you are. I see it going more towards the way of training and development, the augmented reality versus the virtual reality. I can't see businesses either just, here's your headset, here's your Oculus, and let's all sit around in a room staring at each other.
I do think it's really interesting though, because 10 years ish ago, I should say, Google, I think was way ahead of its time with Google Glass. And there were a lot of privacy concerns with Google Glass and, the ability to record people without their consent. And it's just interesting how the landscape has changed within a decade. I don't know.
I did think of something interesting. And this goes towards the market research side of it, is being able to track your eye movement and where your eye is on the page. I remember doing those studies way back when, I don't want to date myself, in college, where how do people interact with your newspaper? How do people interact with your white paper? How do people interact with your billboard? Where does their eye go first? How do they read it? Which, by the way, still a Z pattern. They look at the upper left-hand quadrant, not the upper left-hand corner, and they go across the top, down, and then the Z across. So for all you design people, put your logo in the bottom right corner, put your logo in the upper left-hand corner.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
and so I'm sitting there thinking, I could buy 6 or 7 of those, and all right, let's do some market research. If your company, and hopefully your company believes in that stuff. If it doesn't, it should. I don't know, at about $3,500 a pop for a one-time study. That's just me.
Fair point. Well, stay tuned. Let us know what you think. Would you spend $3,500, $3,600? Would you buy this? Do you think it's viable for the future? Let us know in the comments. Hit us up in the email. Let us know. If you do want to purchase one for us in 2024, we'll test it out. We'll give our full review. We'll do a podcast with the headsets on. I don't know.
I was going to say, the Apple listeners we do have, send us one. Get with us. We'll give you the address to send it. Like I said, we'll do it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Thomas, another thing that's really been in the news the last week or so has been Reddit, and I love Reddit. I think it's a great source for information, interaction. Granted, we're talking about the online world. I think you've got to take things on there with a grain of salt at times. To source truth versus exaggerations, news versus speculation. But Reddit, their CEO, Steve Huffman, recently announced that they were going to be increasing their fees for API access. And so, this is not something new that happens for tech companies. I mean, we've seen Twitter increase their API fees. Instagram and Facebook have changed their API fees. And basically what this meant is there's a popular Reddit, I guess, viewing app called Apollo. It was actually mentioned during WWDC. Their CEO claims that in order to utilize the Reddit API starting July 1st, they would have to pay something like $20 million a year. And that essentially bankrupts their company. So they announced they were, I don't think they would be able to support the app until I think July 30th is when they announced they were going to cease their operations. So as a result, several Reddit pages, subreddits as they're called, announced that they were going to do a blackout for 48 hours, which meant that a lot of these forums where you go and communicate, share information. The one that I like is the Houston subreddit. It's great to get local news. You wouldn't be able to access it, even if you were a member of the page. They were set to private, or the content was completely removed. You couldn't post. And it was done for about 48 hours. That was the intention, right? To kind of send a message to Reddit that, you need to fight for that little guy, that capitalism is bad. Problem is, the Reddit CEO basically, issued a statement basically slamming the protest leaders, who are these moderators of the pages, saying that he'll change the rules that favor landed gentry, basically saying that the user protest on Reddit this week is led by a minority of moderators and doesn't have wide support. And so, these moderators who have ultimate power on Reddit decided, well, we're going to continue the blackout then. And so that left a lot of users very upset and frustrated that they couldn't access this information, that they couldn't use the platform as a resource. Of course, some of these moderators tried to, move over to Discord as their, alternative, which, just the structure of Discord is chaotic. And then Reddit, I think, came out on Thursday and said, look, if these, moderators aren't going to, lift these blackouts, we'll get rid of them. That there needs to be more sense of democratic take on Reddit, right? That these moderators need to be held accountable. And I don't know if you use Reddit like I do, but I fully side with Reddit on this. Like, it's a business. You've got to be able to make money, right? Whether you're a private company or you're a public company, if you're charging for your API, do it. if there's an app out there that can afford the 20 million or whatever that fee is, then they will be sustainable, right? But if your only business model is relying on a cheap or free API, then you probably don't have the best business model. And then these moderators who try to consolidate all this power, it's a bad look. And I did check right before we started recording. The Houston Reddit, as of this morning, is now live again. It's no longer private. But one change is the moderators are now hidden, so you can't see who the moderators are now. And last week you could. So I think it's interesting. Just kind of want to hear your thoughts on this whole Reddit situation.
So I know you and I have gone round and round about Reddit versus Twitter being the one who breaks the news and who's using what. So for our listeners, I'm going to go just take a little step back. Reddit is just a mega website, and you can kind of go in and you can type whatever subject you want, hashtag anything you want, and then it brings up basically a forum for those topics. Wall Street Bets is another one that's really big that has affected the stock market. I use it a lot. I've been following a lot of what's going on in Ukraine and Russia and those kind of things, because it is basically anybody can put it in there. And then when Austin says a moderator, basically it's an individual. Sometimes it's the person who created the thread or the subject matter. Sometimes it's kind of appointed by Reddit, and they're supposed to go through and make sure that you're not doing hate speech and other things along those lines. But granted, with Reddit, you can also have not safe for work stuff as well. And so I like it because it is literally the original social media channel. Hey, here's where you can get on there. Here's where you can talk. To your point, I think that these moderators who either are getting paid by being an influencer somewhere, form or fashion. Well, we don't know that for sure.
Well, they're not getting paid by Reddit. It's
no, they're not getting paid for Reddit.
Yeah,
but
they're able to grow their online presence as a result of it. Yeah.
And so they think they have all the power, but yet Reddit is very well established. Parler is trying to be the same way, but to your point, it is a mess, and it hurts my head just to think about going to that social media platform. And in the business lines, if your business is just a pass-through so that people can look at Reddit and post on Reddit, you probably need to rethink your business model. I'm on the same page for you as Reddit. I have seen a lot more advertising on Reddit as of lately, which I'm really okay with, because it's no different than the ad showing up in your Twitter feed or your Facebook feed or your Insta feed or your TikTok feed. Knowing who you are, what you're looking at, what your thoughts are on each one of it. I hope Reddit does take a step back and try to ensure at least the paid promotion advertising stuff doesn't go the way of the Facebooks, where you can pull back and you can buy it under a veil and you can promote falsehoods and those kind of things.
Yeah. I think maybe a business model for Reddit, and I don't know if they've considered this, is a subscription, right? So if you want to get rid of those ads, which I guess is a plus on apps like Apollo. I don't know that there are ads on Apollo. You could pay $5 a month to remove ads. I mean, people will pay that. It might not be a lot, but you're going to get some revenue from there. Like YouTube, for example, you can watch YouTube, you could watch ads in each video, or you could pay, what is it, $5-10 a month or something like that for YouTube Premium. I pay that. I watch a lot of content on YouTube. I think it's a great platform. I'm more than happy to pay not to see those ads. So that's a revenue source for Google. That could be something for Reddit. And I'm actually going to pull this quote real quick from, it was a June 12th story in Axios by Sarah Fisher, who was actually our first guest on the podcast. She's a media reporter. She talks about the API. And she says the free access meant that so I guess Reddit was giving away their API for free. She writes, the free access meant that almost any developer could access and leverage Reddit's vast pool of data to train artificial intelligence algorithms leveraged by big tech firms such as Google, Microsoft, or OpenAI. Quote, the Reddit corpus of data is really valuable, Reddit CEO and co-founder Steve Huffman told the New York Times in an April interview, but we don't need to give all of that value to some of the largest companies in the world for free. He's absolutely right. Data is king.
Data is king. And if you don't know what the product is, you're the product. I get that when you start off, you open up the APIs for free to get market share, to get people to use it, to do those things. $20 million sounds a little excessive, just personally, because that's a whole lot of API calls. That's almost real-time API calls, and that should be taxing your server. If you're worried about paying $20 million for API calls, you need to also be looking at your server banks, because you're probably overpaying for that as well.
Yeah, and again, I haven't seen anything from Reddit on the cost or how they came up with that number. Maybe that number is too high. Maybe it should be a little bit lower. But again, Reddit as a company has the right to charge for its information. You shouldn't be giving away your value for free. Even as you as a communicator, you shouldn't be offering your services for free constantly. Like if you want to do some pro bono work, to help people out, great. If you want to help out certain causes for free, great. But you can't have a sustainable career if you give away all of your talent and experience for zero sum.
And as for the moderators, I've got very minimal sympathy for them, because, like I said, they're not getting paid by Reddit, but they might be getting paid from other ones. They've basically done the same thing, as they've latched on for some sort of fame and fortune from there.
Yeah, and one last note to kind of close out this conversation, but Reddit did say, I think on Thursday of last week, they were going to be removing the moderators who didn't lift the blackouts. And that's going to be a huge ego boost for a lot of these people. Now they're thinking about unveiling policies where the community can vote moderators out. And that's been a huge concern for a lot of users in the past, is that these moderators have the ultimate control. There's no transparency on what's going on. If they feel that something is against their, let's take politics, for example. If they disagree with something politically, they will remove the post and ban users. So there's no transparency. It's up to individual judgment. And that's another concern as well.
And I echo that as well. Is one person, ultimate power is not good. But as we talk protest, I want to change the subject a little bit to actually really, really good, awesome grassroots efforts and just civil disobedience is what's coming through my mind about the Oakland A's and the ownership wanting to move it to Las Vegas, and how a group of fans got together and basically did a reverse boycott. Don't get me wrong, Oakland A's has probably some of the lowest spending of all the players under the sun. Their attendance has been deplorable, except for the one time they actually went to the playoffs.
That's not actually true. That's misinformation.
All right. Well, correct me on this one then.
I will say the A's for, we're not talking about the last like 3 to 4 years, but prior to that, even though they had been terrible, of late, and their spending has always been low, their attendance was 25,000-30,000 a game, which is about average in Major League Baseball. Now it looks empty because they play in a former NFL stadium that holds 65,000, but the fans in Oakland are loyal. That stadium they play in, the Coliseum, is a dump. I mean, they've been trying to get a new stadium for 10-15 years, maybe even longer. So I do want to say that the A's fans are good.
Oh no, the A's fans, and I think that they will actually follow the team if they do go to Vegas, pending an ownership change.
Yes, that's the kicker.
I think was it the Browns that kind of took place, or here in Houston now the Titans / Oilers to Titans kind of thing, along those lines, but. Oakland does have a tendency to spend less. They're the ones who invented Moneyball, which is now 20 years old. Is that right? I think that I saw an article about that book being 20 years old.
Yeah.
And the history of the shift and the evolution of the game. And, what's your goal? Step one, get to the playoffs. You talk College World Series. How do you win a College World Series title? First step is get your team there. If you can't at least compete in the regular season to make the playoffs, you cannot win a Super Bowl. You cannot win a World Series. You cannot win a national championship in college sports. Goal one, get to the playoffs. And Oakland in the Moneyball definitely did that. So I give him props on that one. But when the reverse protest, where how many people showed up to the stadium? Just under 30K, I think.
Yeah, it was just under 30K. I think stadium capacity the max capacity that they could have because of like the tarps, what sections are open, not open. I think it's 32,000.
So almost 100%. And baseball stadiums are not necessarily the biggest of the stadiums around.
No, because there's 162 games a year.
Yeah, which, don't get me on that soapbox. A little too many, but I do get the concept of the trends. Um, I I think that they sold merchandise, if I remember correctly, or gave away merchandise to like every fan got a shirt to say sell. Um, but at the end of the day, it's the billionaires who are going to make the decisions, the owners of the team, how are they going to make the most money. And with sports, just me personally, and if you're a finance person, a CFO, or just a big time sports nut, if you can help me understand, because I've been watching the Welcome to Wrexham thing
Yeah.
about how much money they're spending to get those players in, and then I look at the Yankees payroll, for lack of a better statement, or Mets, that's probably a better one, $300 million or something like that for just their players. How do they come close to at least breaking even outside of selling a whole lot of $27 beers?
When you mentioned Wrexham, that reminds me there was a story in The Athletic this past week. So I would check it out if I were you. It talks about college football compared to European football. So I think that's actually a really interesting story to look into, if you're kind of interested in that. I will say, I'm kind of looking at some of these numbers. The average payroll for a Major League Baseball team is $161 million. The Oakland A's have the lowest payroll. It's estimated to be $59.6 million. To put that in perspective, the New York Mets, as you mentioned, $344 million. That's by far and away the highest payroll.
Mm-hmm.
Yankees, $279 million. Rangers, who are a team here in Texas, $197 million. Astros, $191 million. So significantly higher than what the A's are doing. And when you look at like revenues, last year, the highest revenue for a Major League Baseball team was $565 million. And that was the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Yankees, $485 million in revenue. Those teams are valued at $5 billion and $6 billion. I guarantee if the Yankees or Dodgers sold, it would go for much higher than that Forbes valuation right now. You look at the Astros, who just won the World Series. Their annual revenue last year was $400 million. The Oakland A's, their annual revenue is $208 million. So, they're making a killing.
They are making a killing, but you're talking revenue, and so
yeah, you remove the the 60 million or whatever that they have for the payroll. That's still 140 million. Whereas you look at the Yankees, for example, 482 million. Okay, now they have a $300 million payroll. So that it's interesting.
And I think the Yankees are interesting because if I remember correctly, they have their own television network, like the Longhorn Network, a college sports team here in Texas.
Yeah, and that's something that's probably going to be going away soon. I think Major League Baseball wants to take back those television rights because some of these small regional networks they don't want to pay for these rights fees anymore. And so there's been a lot of TV blackouts. A lot of fans can't watch games. We went through that here in Houston. A decade ago, Comcast Sportsnet, which was a upstart regional sports network that was owned by the Houston Rockets and the Houston Astros. It was only available on probably 30% of cable users in Houston for a bit. Now it's with AT&T Sportsnet. I believe the Astros and the Rockets are trying to get it back, but distribution is a huge problem. And for example, I don't have cable here in Houston. I can't watch the Astros games. So the only way that I can watch the Astros games is I have to buy an MLB TV package. But if I live in the market, I can't watch the Astros games. So I have to buy a VPN, and I have to turn on my VPN to Chicago, Atlanta, LA, whichever city they're not playing in. And then I have to AirPlay the game that I have. And that's a huge problem that Major League Baseball and Commissioner Rob Manfred understand is people are moving to digital. Right? They want to be able to watch the games on their phones. That's something that the NBA does so well, is all of the highlights, they're all over Twitter. That's how kids see. They don't watch the full games. They watch the highlight packages that come out. Baseball, if they want to modernize, they need to be able to get rid of those blackouts, let people watch the games wherever they are. That's a huge problem.
I hear you can watch the games on Reddit.
Not anymore.
Oh, they block those out. Or a lot of those random sports that come from there. No, and so I'm interested to watch what happens with Oakland and the fans. And to your point, they are very loyal fans. It'll be interesting to see how many fans follow the team when they move to Vegas. And sports fans are fickle. You know, how many Houston Oilers or Tennessee Titans fans were there till the Texans came around? If you go out to West Texas, huge stronghold for Dallas Cowboys. And now there's the Kansas City Chiefs. And granted, that's because of a college football player who went up there and they basically said, we want to do this.
Yeah.
So much that you actually watch the viewing patterns. It's like Dallas Cowboys, and then you see a little red of Kansas City.
It's interesting though. I mean, I remember when the Oilers left Houston in the 90s, when Bud Adams moved the team from Houston to, at the time, Memphis, and then ultimately Nashville. I was upset. I was hurt. I think I cried as a little kid. And it's tough. You know, there was a guy on the post game show for the A's. I can't recall his name, but he actually teared up, you know, talking about how he had so many positive memories with his dad, hoped to share them with his son. And, you know, in 10 years, he's not going to be able to have that anymore. Like, I know professional sports isn't for everyone, but it's a great way to bring the community together, to have shared experiences with people. And I feel bad for the people in the city of Oakland. I mean, they've lost the Raiders to LA. They lost the Warriors to San Francisco. And now they're about to lose Oakland. And Las Vegas, which had no professional sports teams because leagues were concerned about gambling. Now they have the Vegas Golden Knights, who just won the Stanley Cup. They've got an NFL team. They're about to have a Major League Baseball team. And, you know, they have a huge F1 race coming up in November. I mean, Vegas is becoming, you know, the sports mecca for the US. It's fascinating what has changed in 10 years.
It really is. And to your point, I think that I think of the Cleveland to Baltimore also comes to mind in the 90s, where there's a lot of people who didn't follow suit of becoming a Ravens fan because they didn't like the owner. And so there will be a void there. I'm intrigued to see what happens. But there are other sports teams in the area that they can latch on to.
Yeah, they could be Giants fans. You know, it's Dodgers, Padres. You know, there's a lot of other California teams that they could support. But it's having that team that you've grown up with leave because of ownership. It's tough, but that's the nature of the business.
I watched a real quick, I'm going to final thoughts, like 20 minutes of USC and the rise of USC, and talking about how all the LA teams left. And so there was this void, and UCLA didn't jump on the bandwagon where Pete Carroll started bringing in the celebrities and basically turned to get into a professional team. Hindsight being 2020, it was more professional than college. Before the NIL, yes, the Bush push. And
give his Heisman back. Yeah.
Yes, I think he should get it back, but the Matt Leinart flame out in the NFL. So there's something to fill the void. I do think that it's there, but it shows that if you truly want to make a difference, your pocketbook technically talks. And so you're talking about the revenue, whether you're going to the games, that's a small percentage of what comes in. TV rights, that's a bigger percentage. But how many people are buying jerseys and hats and things like that is going directly to that team or to that player?
Yes. Here's my final thoughts. I'm going to do two soccer references. So one, the Bundesliga, which is the German soccer league. They basically protect fans. They understand how valuable these teams are to the communities in which they are part of. You know, they've been around these clubs for hundreds of years. I think they have, it's either a 50+1 rule or a 49+1 rule. I can't remember what it is, but basically what it does is the local fans have like majority ownership. And so, for example, if Thomas, you're a multi-billionaire, you could go out and buy a Premier League team. You cannot go out and buy a Bundesliga team. You could buy a stake in it, but you're not going to have the full control over, you know, wanting to ruin a team. You know, the fans do have some say. I think that's cool. The last thing that I'm going to say is Ted Lasso, which is it's a show that I think a lot of people have watched. Season 3, kind of questionable. I think it had some good moments.
Blah blah blah. I still have 2 episodes to go. Don't ruin it for me.
So cover your ears, Thomas, or if you haven't seen the last episode, But Rebecca, the owner, she makes a comment in there, where they talk about the valuation of the club because they've been having success. And I think they say, the club's valued at like $2 billion or something, which isn't far-fetched for a Premier League team. And, she considers selling it. And then I can't remember which episode it's in. It might be in episode 10. She says something like, this isn't my team, it's the fans' team. And I know it's television, it's made up, but ownership, I think good owners understand that the fans are their customers. Bad owners just strictly look at the pocketbooks. So if you're a business, take into consideration your audience as well, your customers as well. At the end of the day, if the customers and your audience leave, your revenue's gone.
It's funny. We are the #1 international business podcast, and we do talk international communications a lot.
It's a verifiable fact.
Verifiable. I think one of the things that the United States sports might actually do good for is the whole relegation. And if you're a fan of Ted Lasso,
relegation, yeah.
And reality is, outside of NFL football, we have a natural system already in place. With soccer, MLS, which, by the way, Messi's coming to Miami, just in case you're wondering. With different tiers that come from there. Baseball, you have minor leagues. Basketball, you have the D leagues. Hockey, you have minor league. So I think that would definitely be a way to help prevent owners from just looking at the bottom line. To your point about the fan ownership, Green Bay just pops in my mind.
I'm an owner of the Green Bay Packers.
I know a lot of people that are owners.
Share.
I know people that have like multiple shares just for it. I know somebody who actually has a Green Bay Packers certificate of ownership that hangs above their bedroom. His wife loves it. And by that, I mean, doesn't like it at all. But I've seen it. It's funny and it's great times.
Awesome.
So my final thoughts are, if you take care of your customers will take care of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as customers, don't buy a cheap product for the sake of being cheap. Buy a product that's of good quality, good value. And that goes across the board, whether you're B2B, B2C. Because as we've always talked about, we work in completely different industries and have worked in industries across the gambit, is that you have to sell the product for the customer.
Absolutely. Well, Thomas, it's been fun recording this episode of the Business Communicators, and we hope everyone else enjoyed the content that we provided you. And I think that's a wrap. Let us know what you think. Hit us up on social media at Biz Communicator on all the platforms. thebusinesscommunicators.com. You can find us, DM us, whatever. We'll go from there. But on behalf of my co-host this week, Thomas Payne, my name is Austin Staton. See you next week. Take care, everyone.
Enjoy.
You've been listening to the Business Communicators. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review.